Conservative commentator Matt Walsh joins the culture war, on the side against culture. The dumbest people on the internet right heard a British filmmaker known for writing male protagonists on valiant quests, casting his first person of color in his 8th film, retelling an ancient Greek epic that they bitch and moan the woke doesn't want you reading in school, and decided to hate on his new film. Why not take a win where you can get it? I wanted to break down one of Matt Walsh's videos, undoubtedly made before he saw the movie, Ben Shapiro's much better review, like comparatively, and some of the Twitter discourse I've seen. If you can bear it, join me on this arduous odyssey through the worst review of a Nolan film since the one my grandpa muttered after he fell asleep next to me in Oppenheimer.
Is some jerk making your life miserable?
I'm currently working on a big video where I watch every Odyssey movie. I don't say that to self-promote in the first minute of the video. I don't want to be one of those YouTubers, but rather to explain I'm thinking a lot about this story. And I wanted to do this tangent to discuss how people reacted to the Odyssey and discuss bigger picture right-wing film criticism on the internet. And I didn't want to make that video too bloated. So let's just start. Walsh begins by saying,
I don't want to make it sound like Nolan is only trying to emasculate the Odyssey. He's also trying to remove as much of the Greek and Mediterranean influence and character as he possibly can.
I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to emasculate Walsh by giving him a higher voice, but I will occasionally be speeding up his clips. I guess conservatives can only have a lethargic, disinterested, improvised voice, or the hummingbird wing lilt of Benjamin Shapiro. Let's begin with what I find to be Walsh's weirdest complaint, and it's about the music. He quotes a Times interview which reads, Nolan instructed Göransson not to use orchestra in the score, if only to subvert expectations for a swords and sandals film. It's not like the orchestra existed back then, says Göransson. So this is a nice little puff piece point, right? The sword and sandals films like Ulysses and Hercules of the 1950s had a stock score that Göransson wants to break from, subverting the idea that a film about Greeks in a ship has to have music that sounds like this. Because why would it? That's an entirely modern convention. So what issue could Walsh take with this?
So there's a lot to think about here. First of all, he's saying they won't include an orchestra in the score because the orchestra supposedly didn't exist back then.
So what exactly is the rationale for having synths in the score? I'm also fairly certain that Bronze Age people didn't have IMAX cameras or any of the other technology they're using in this film. So this is totally incoherent.
Nah, it's not incoherent. You're just not reading the sentence. Orchestras didn't exist in the Mycenaean age, so why is that where Göransson has to start thinking from? And look, this is a small point in the grand scheme of the review, but I emphasize it because it accidentally explains what a lot of conservatives can't seem to wrap their minds around. Göransson is a great composer because he melds old and new. If you're a conservative, however, you've blindly accepted your artistic inheritance, and you cannot fathom creative risk or reinterpretation. Now, the second complaint that Walsh has about the music is in Nolan's casting of award-winning rapper, songwriter, and mosh pit serial killer Travis Scott as a bard, which he did because he says rappers are our modern oral poets. Walsh tries to ridicule this choice by reading some Travis lyrics.
Yeah, past the dogs a celly, sending texts ain't sending kites. Yeah, he said.
This is how I know these motherfuckers spit up slop and don't take these videos seriously enough to research at all, because these are the lamest lyrics to ridicule Travis Scott with. This is off sicko mode.
He's in love with who I am.
They obviously just clicked the first song that came up. It's his most popular one. And I don't want to throw him a bone here, but Travis is an awful lyricist. I'm a brown guy from Houston, okay? I love his music, but I'm going to tell y'all right now, he's the man who came up with the bars, I can shit all day, diaper, and wanna know my longer than a Pringle box. Oh, and look, a Fox News bar. It's a shame y'all can't even scroll your mouse once, because you would have loved that one. Walsh doesn't just find it troubling that Scott is a bad lyricist, he also finds the very comparison between a rapper and a bard to be bad. And not for the reason you might think. It's totally unrelated to the quality of the lyrics.
Never mind the fact that, unlike Homer's Odyssey, rap music is not handed down through generations by many different performers. Rappers sing a song and they record the finalized version of it in a studio, and then here's the recording of the song. Like, we know about old rap songs because we have the original recordings. Okay, it's not like your grandmother is sitting you down and reciting the oral tradition of Back That Ass Up by Juvenile.
You might be stupid, bro. Do you think there were phonographs in Mycenaean Greece? Do you think there was an iPod Touch? Oh, sorry, no, they didn't have that yet. Achilles was rocking the iPod Nano, you fucking moron. Bards had to recite music because you couldn't record. Now that you can record, Travis doesn't have to come up in your room and rap at you from on top of your bed. Songs are still passed down from generation to generation, except now your dad just plays it for you or sends you a Spotify link instead of having to sing it. So yes, bards and rappers do the exact same thing. Now let's get to the most beautiful segue he has in his video, transitioning from the choice of music to actors who have transitioned.
You know, it's true that they didn't have orchestras in ancient Greece, but they did have orchestras like for the last 400 years at least. On the other hand, we've had transgenderism for like 400 seconds.
Trying to win a gender or sexuality argument while you tout ancient Greece as the big daddy of your civilization might be a tactical mistake, bro. Greeks are like the gayest ever. That's like their whole thing. So no, transgenderism, as he puts it, is not a 400-second-old concept. Check out Plato's Symposium. It'll blow your natural mind. I know you haven't read it. And for those of y'all watching this who are into cinema and ancient Greece and aren't, weirdos and transphobic and homophobic and shit, I'd recommend Hedwig and the Angry Inch, an awesome film that situates modern queer life in a long lineage of people who have doubted their gender in a beautifully intertextual way. So yeah, this portion of the video is about the casting of Elliot Page. When Walsh was making this video, the film hadn't even come out yet, so he was operating under the Twitter assumption that Page was going to play Achilles, which is somewhat true in like a composite character way. But there's a setup for a trans joke now, right? That's what these guys love to do. It's their bread and butter. Achilles heel, trans man. What does he do with this material?
Unless Nolan is changing the story so that the Achilles heel is misgendering.
Oh my God, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the fuck?
I'm sorry. I'm not laughing at the joke. That is just such a bad joke on a joke level that it tickled me pink. I don't want to do a transphobic joke, but like if you've surgically transitioned, you famously have sore raw spots on your body. But rather than take advantage of the physicality of that joke, he goes with a 2016 punchline that Steven Crowder did 8,000 times before Matt Walsh ever even picked up a mic. After this point, Walsh doesn't spend too much time on the casting of Elliot Page because there's really nothing to say. The fire that Walsh has in his heart for Lupita Nyong'o's casting as Helen of Troy burns a lot brighter. And that's for a really simple reason. Colorism, racism, and hatred of particularly darker-skinned women has a long history, especially in film. It's easy for a lazy guy like Walsh to talk about why Lupita cannot be the prettiest woman in the Mediterranean. On the other hand, there's really no argument for why a person who has transitioned cannot play a role in their newly presenting identity.
I'm a 35-year-old white man.
Even if you can bring yourself to care about gendered sports or elementary school bathrooms with litter boxes or whatever culture war bullshit they got going on, there's really no argument to be made in Hollywood. But let's just move on to Lupita.
Helen from the 2004 movie Troy. On the right, you have Lupita Nyong'o.
One of the most fucked up aspects of this incredibly racist situation is that the picture used by numerous press outlets to smear Lupita as ugly is an AI-modified image of her as Patsy in 12 Years a Slave, in which she's wearing makeup and prosthetics to depict bruising, scarring, and swelling from a beating by her master. So it's not actually her face, her body is AI-generated, and all of that is placed next to some random white bitch. I hate y'all, bro.
And white people are bad.
He's catching on.
Lupita Nyong'o also plays Helen's sister, who's marriage to Menelaus's brother.
Who? Whose brother? Matthew. Did you sit down and record this video without reading what was going in the teleprompter? How could he have possibly messed this up? Who would ever say Menelaus as Menelaus?
I didn't study ancient Greece in college. In fact, I didn't study anything in college because I didn't go to college. But
oh, okay. Got it. That's how. Yeah.
Now, Lupita Nyong'o is, as
no historical sense whatsoever to cast a sub-Saharan African in this role. It is an absurd casting choice that totally breaks the immersion of the film.
All right, let's just meet this argument where it's at. There has been ample discussion the last decade or two about the nature of casting. Who is allowed to play whom? It's an ancient question. In ancient Greece, for example, women would not be on stage, so women were not allowed to play women. I wonder how the Daily Wire team behind Lady Ballers would feel about their so-called progenitors of Western civilization. This is the world's most obvious no you from our friends on the red side of the political spectrum. Over the years, they got sick and tired of hearing that their films had to be burned right out of the archives because of casting choices, and now they want to get us back. And look, I don't agree with censorship. I'm a film student. I love film history. I love film form. I don't fuck with blacklisting and all this kind of thing. So I'm not saying that I don't get why Matt Walsh is mad, but obviously he's still making racist piece of shit arguments, so I'm going to refute it.
But we all know that if a major Hollywood studio made a film set in Africa featuring iconic African characters and then cast white people in some of the key roles, none of the people defending the Odyssey casting would be nearly as forgiving. In fact, they'd literally be protesting in the street.
He says iconic African characters because he cannot name a single African story iconic in the West or a film that could be remade with white people. And that's precisely the problem. Racially blind casting has become kind of the norm. If Lupita Nyong'o has to wait for the next time a black film is made, then she's not going to win another Oscar. She literally hasn't been nominated since her debut, a brutal film about slavery. And if writers and directors have to make black films or brown films or Asian films to cast great actors and actresses like Lupita, like Michelle Yeoh, Steven Yeun, then they're never going to get cast either. So you have to just fundamentally misunderstand the industry to make this argument. And the reason why it doesn't flip the other way is because minority films are in the minority, and they're made so that these actors can play these roles and these stories can be seen. With mainstream films that are white stories that are big blockbusters, the same doesn't apply. Also, I do want to tackle this particular casting choice rather than getting into the debate writ large, too. Lupita Nyong'o plays Helen of Troy as well as Helen's twin sister in what is, by the way, one of the strongest performances in the film. Side note, if these so-called conservatives actually cared about conserving the traditional arts, they would love Lupita. She's Yale-trained. She grew up doing Shakespeare. She is the kind of artist you need to promote if you want your art to continue. Anyways, if this is such a big deal, I bet you're wondering, what would Helen have looked like, right? I mean, she's a Spartan woman. What did women from Sparta look like? Big and brown-skinned. Okay, cool. What about their parents? Maybe that could help us. If there's like art of their father or mother, we would know what they're supposed to look like. Their dad is Zeus. Okay, her and her sister, their dad is a god. So we're arguing about the color of skin of two characters literally descended from divinity.
Absolutely.
Nolan is technically talented, but a coward, too afraid to do anything that even slightly challenges the spirit of the age, which is why, although he's a good artist, he'll never be a great one.
Honestly, not a bad point, man. If this sentence was about how Nolan resigns himself to the most milquetoast thematic messaging, I'd agree. If Walsh wasn't describing casting a white lady as challenging the spirit of the age, he'd have a decent point. Nolan is definitely afraid. He has crutches. He's not a great writer. But that's not what he meant, so no bonus points, buddy.
We're going to get him out of here.
And before we move on from racialized casting, I do want to give a shout out to my brother Himesh Patel. He delivers an incredible performance, one of the best in the film, second only to Lupita and Robert Pattinson, probably.
That's not ridiculous. That's not ridiculous to say.
He has been severely misused by a lot of filmmakers since he broke through with Yesterday, a cute film, and this is what Twitter had to say about his casting. Take a look at that. The Britons, of whom Walsh is descended, traded with the Mycenaean Greeks, but had no real cultural continuity with them, did not share a language, a religion, a culture. On the other hand, Himesh Patel's ancestors did not trade with Greeks in the Mycenaean age, but were anciently connected, even more so through Indo-European language and religion. Later, around 1,000 years after the Odyssey would purportedly have happened, and a couple hundred years after Homer, Indo-Bactrian kingdoms were founded, directly connecting India with Greece. My point is not that Indians should start claiming Greece or Greek accomplishments. Rather, it's to destabilize what Western civilization is. What may seem like a simple, scholarly, historical conclusion of civilizational continuity is actually an extremely political decision. And everyone in this video that I'm tackling makes the wrong choice. Because there is no such thing as a direct Western canon from America to Britain, back to Rome to ancient Greece. To round out his video, Walsh just directly reads another man's tweet. Sorry, that's not a euphemism. He just, he reads a really long tweet because he's not a film critic and he doesn't know what to say. After making the dumbest points possible off some Time article, he decides to go bulimic on us and just regurgitate for like 5-10 minutes. And honestly, the point that Alain Astruc makes is not even a ridiculous one. He argues that Nolan's writing and visual language seeks to rationalize and pathologize. There's a little quip in there about how if Nolan made a Santa movie, he would feel the need to explain how Santa does it all in one night. And I like this criticism, especially for a filmmaker who grounded himself in war films like Dunkirk and Oppenheimer, and is now making a truly mythical and fantastical war epic. If his adaptation feels incompetent or incomplete, there's something interesting to consider what's different between these films. But Walsh then extrapolates, because he has to at least, do a little more than spewing this guy's shit, with a truly baffling point.
Now, modern mainstream filmmakers are, for the most part, allergic to anything mystical or supernatural or mythological. They have to filter everything through a materialist lens because that's the lens by which they see the world. Maybe all the race swaps and all the incoherent details are part of some ill-advised larger effort to connect the dots that don't need to be connected.
This is, for all intents and purposes, nonsense. What modern mainstream filmmakers, what supernatural or mythological films, what materialism? More pointedly, how would race swaps or the casting of a trans man accomplish rationalization of a 1,000-year-old poem? He turned a somewhat media-literate man's review into straight gobbledygook. If by mainstream filmmakers he means blockbuster directors, someone like James Gunn, who he mentions by name in this video, I think he would be exceptionally incorrect. Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxy films are a lot of fun, and definitely some of the best superhero films to come out of that era when it's all we all got fed it. They are not in any way frightened of the unexplained supernatural. In fact, mysticism and the sort of blind devotion, almost, that Walsh describes is the domain of fairy tales and children's stories. And that's exactly the IP-driven Hollywood's taste. But most of all, if you believe that film needs to be more supernatural on a story level and not seek to explain, you are going against the very textual pedagogy of the Judeo-Christian values that you think are so important. Nolan is unquestionably in the descent of a Christian worldview, and the only guy who seems to get that and doesn't shoot his own movement in the foot is Ben Get Her Wet Shapiro.
Let's look at the stats. I've got the facts. My money like Liz, my pockets are...
From the earliest analysis in this video, Ben is logical. He explains that there is no way the Odyssey could have tanked at the box office, and betting against Christopher Nolan was like betting that a bear wouldn't shit in the woods.
Directed by Christopher Nolan, who took the story of developing the nuclear bomb and also a Senate hearing and turned that into a box office hit. If you're talking about top all-time filmmakers, you are talking right now about people like John Ford, Christopher Nolan, Steven Spielberg, William Wyler.
Okay, if you didn't already know, Ben Shapiro's parents worked in Hollywood, he grew up in Burbank, and even dreamt of being a screenwriter. While Matt Walsh probably could not name a single John Ford or William Wyler film, Ben gives us a list that isn't bad, particularly for my taste. I mean, I've already got a video essay up on this channel about 2 Wyler films. I love his inclusion. But it's also tremendously obvious that Shapiro has to list a bunch of filmmakers who don't lean too far to the left, especially John Ford going first on the list. There are legends that he chooses not to name because he isn't allowed to. So if you're not going to win that wokeness sank the film at the box office, what's your alternative argument? Well, it's that you actually won. It's that The Odyssey is really a conservative film. While this may initially seem like coping from a butthurt baby boy, I actually find his analysis very fair.
Nolan actually takes Christian morality and injects it into a poem that describes a litany of savagery in a pagan civilization. What the movie is about is the idea that if you violate the golden rule, treat others as you would be treated, that if you violate the golden rule, you shatter something fundamental in the universe and it unleashes dark forces on the universe, which sometimes can only be rebottled by an act that continues to violate morality, but then you have to accept the punishment.
Yeah, not a bad point. Films like Oppenheimer and The Odyssey are extremely invested in how a man personally deals with his guilt, how a man atones for his sins. That's an almost quintessentially Christian concept. Moreover, The Odyssey sees a liberal world order falling apart, particularly because of the protagonist's choices. Nolan is British. Britain and America have done a shit ton of war, nasty war together during Nolan's lifetime. And in previous centuries, I don't know if y'all are familiar with history at all, but Britain also did some fucked up stuff in the past as well.
I don't know if you guys are history buffs or not, but...
His script refashions the abduction of Helen into a Gulf of Tonkin or a 9/11. But at the same time, how can we turn that power, that sword of Damocles, inward? He asks. In the same way that Odysseus returns to slay his suitors, what is that option for us?
Because of the idiotic, and it is idiotic, casting of Elliot Page. And I call her Elliot Page because you can legally change her name. You can't legally change your sex.
Okay, good. Right back to the important stuff. Thank you, Ben. The legalism strikes again with you can legally change your name but not your sex. Right. Hollywood, a place where everyone really cares about honoring your legal name. Just ask Norma Jean Mortensen, Eric Marlon Bishop, and Natalie Hirschlag. Sorry, I didn't mean to make it sound uglier on purpose. It's just an ugly name. I'm sorry. I love you. After the transphobic diversion, Ben Shapiro gets to the issue that I was trying to drill out earlier that Walsh's intellectual incompetence made impossible discussing.
See, Western civilization is not just Greek. Western civilization is Greek and Jerusalem.
I haven't really kept up with these conservative figures in the last few years, but as righteous anti-Zionism has quickly turned into a meme of vicious anti-Semitism, I wonder if Shapiro doubts his political allegiances. His entire reason for being a conservative is undoubtedly his religion. Interacting with the text of the Torah and rabbinic literature is a fundamental aspect of Judaism, giving him his central legalistic dogma that informs how he thinks about every American issue. And then on a foreign policy level, he obviously cares about Israel. There was once an era in which religious values were the lens for conservative art criticism, but now that a new coalition has been built with disgusting MAGA folks who loudly and boldly say that a black Helen of Troy is not fuckable enough for them, they're lost. Wait, I'm sorry. So why did Shapiro's screenwriting career fail?
I've written a couple comedies, kind of hour-long dramedies for, spec script.
And have they been bought?
No. One is that it's hard to sell anything in this town. It was not a hit job on Leonard Goldberg. I treat him very well in the book. In fact, most of the people in the book I treat very well.
Okay, let's round this thing out. Everybody I've looked at in this video, from the reviewers to the people on Twitter, are struggling with the same issue. How do we get back at the fact that art is a leftist space, or at least a liberal space? This is the pin I had in earlier. Shapiro wrote a whole book to try to rationalize how liberalism infested TV, how they blacklisted him for his views. But at the same time, the history of cinema and television is inherently left-wing. It all goes back to one of the very first things I said, that Ludwig broke from using an orchestra and Walsh just couldn't get it.
The people who write TV are incredibly talented. That they have a political agenda, but they're very talented. There can be conservatives who are funny. Liberals may not find them funny.
All right.
Shapiro was forced to acknowledge that on a mechanical level, on a joke level, liberal writers are great and conservatives don't even try. His list of top 4 directors is clearly reeling with this task. So anytime you go online and you see people complaining about black or brown people just existing, know it's from a failing sect of people desperately trying to reclaim control of the entire landscape of images and culture. And the only method they can even think of is by repurposing and spinning the very complaints we made about representation. Hey, because let's be honest, if they were trying to spin Me Too back on the left, they'd have to give up all their people, even the president, even the vice president. I've heard of the casting couch, but can you be Me Too'd by a couch? I really like that joke, if you couldn't tell. Thank you for watching this video. This was so much fun to write. If you could not tell, I used to debate. I'll really, get into the nitty-gritty down the flow, baby. If y'all know, y'all know. And so if you would like to see more of this stuff where I respond to conservatives or just to bad film criticism in general, it doesn't have to be from conservatives. God knows leftists, 80% of them are dumb also. Just let me know if you would like more funny, angry videos like this rather than the essayistic, scholarly approach I try to bring to a lot of my content. All right, click on one of these videos if you'd like. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.